Female student died tragically on the rooftop, her body shattered with multiple compound fractures. According to the forensic examination, this would require a fall from a height of at least 100 meters. However, what's strange is that this rooftop is already the tallest in all of Hong Kong, and there were no records of any planes flying over that night. Where did the female student fall from? This baffled the police. Suddenly, a scream rang out, and something else fell down. It was the forensic pathologist who was conducting the autopsy. Just then, a car arrived at the scene, and Inspector Tide descended from it, exuding an aura of dominance in his black trench coat. He pulled out a test tube from his waist and threw it to the ground, instantly igniting a ring of fire. He instructed everyone to step over the fire. It was a ritual to ward off evil spirits. When the ghost saw him, it dropped a TV receiver from the high-rise, but Tide didn't move. A green light flashed above his head and deflected the receiver. Tide's partner also floated up to a nearby power pole. Traffic cop Wind and 2 police dogs at the scene could also see what was happening. After evacuating the scene, they arrived at the rooftop and quickly found the ghost of the female student. Tide learned from her that it was her teacher who had killed her. So, his partner found the ghost teacher hidden in the wall. This teacher, unfortunate in death, sought to drag his students down with him. Tide threw a test tube at the ghost, containing a potion that would make the ghost visible to mortals while also having its strength. But the effect would only last for 5 minutes, so Tide had to act fast. He drew his soul-devouring gun. Its trigger pricked his blood, imbuing the bullets with the ability to kill ghosts upon contact with blood. The teacher ghost was immediately obliterated, losing the chance for reincarnation. After resolving the situation, Tide and his partner went to the police station, revealing that they were also police officers. However, their department, established in 2002, consisted of only 1 human and 1 ghost, specializing in dealing with supernatural disturbances. Despite significant funding from headquarters, they were considered a waste, and a vote was looming to disband the department. His partner intervened by manipulating a pen, frightening the superior into backing down, thus saving the department. Later, Tide sought out the department's founder, the retired Paper Chan, to talk, only to learn that his partner was about to reincarnate. Tide and his partner were once good friends, but his partner was accidentally killed by Tide during duty, leading to their partnership. Now, it was time for his partner to move on. After a brief farewell, his partner moved on to the next life. Guided by Paper Chan, Tide found a new partner, Wind, who could also see ghosts. Having witnessed Tide's abilities at a crime scene, Wind wanted to join this department. From then on, Wind also donned a black trench coat, and the department expanded from 1 human and 1 ghost to 2 humans. Wind and Tide arrived outside a dance hall where a fire had occurred, burning people to death but leaving their clothes intact. They split up to search for clues. Tide quickly found a charred body in a corner, while Wind, hearing the bustling sounds inside the dance hall, fell into a hallucination. The ghost had already set everything up, personally luring Wind. Just as she was about to succeed, a vial of potion was thrown at her, revealing her true form. She was a fire ghost, and the illusion disappeared. Wind was left paralyzed with fear. Fortunately, Tide, with his experience, swiftly defeated the fire ghost, using his soul-devouring gun to obliterate her with a single shot. After they left, a figure arrived at the scene. It was the fire ghost's boyfriend, a water ghost. Discovering his beloved had been killed, he was consumed with rage, vowing revenge against Tide and Wind. Meanwhile, Tide found Paper Chan, complaining about Wind's incompetence, when they saw a boy hit by a car and sent flying into the sky. However, the boy quickly got up, dusted himself off, and ran towards Tide. It turned out the boy had died from the car accident and had become a ghost. Tide was acquainted with him and advised him to reincarnate soon, lest he repeat the experiences of his death. However, the boy told him he had to wait for his mother to join him on the journey. Tide, due to his ability to see ghosts, had become friends with various spirits but lacked living friends. Paper Chan mentioned that he was a lone star, and everyone close to him would eventually be affected, including his new partner, Wind. Tide pondered how to maintain distance from Wind when he discovered that Wind had moved into his house, wanting to be friends. One day, they received a commission from a ghost and went to the hospital. Tide encountered Danielle, a nurse he had a crush on. They had met a few days ago on a bus, and they were instantly drawn to each other. Danielle asked Tide for money, claiming she had no change. However, Tide was aware of his fate. Anyone who borrowed something from him would ultimately be affected. So, he hesitated. After Danielle's repeated requests, he lent her the money, reminding her to remember to repay it. Meeting again at the hospital provided the perfect opportunity for Danielle to repay the debt. When he asked Danielle to repay the money, she misunderstood it as flirting, so she agreed to repay it tomorrow. This naturally provided a reason to see each other again. The next day, Tide waited for Danielle at the hospital. The hallway lights flickered, and only he could see the ghost of the boy appearing outside the delivery room. The boy told Tide he had come to take his mother with him. Shortly after, the the doctor came out of the room and informed the man outside that his wife couldn't be saved due to excessive bleeding. The man collapsed instantly. At this moment, the ghost of his wife emerged from the room. She looked pleasantly surprised to see the boy, but, upon realizing that her son had come to take her, she glanced at her husband and then told the boy to enter his brother's body for reincarnation. Her husband had lost too much, she wanted to leave him with hope. With tears in her eyes, she dropped a tear onto the boy's hand. Tide stepped forward to console them, explaining that a ghost's tears symbolize love and rebirth. With his help, the child was saved in the delivery room. Meanwhile, Danielle overheard Tide talking to himself in the hallway, finding it all quite intriguing. As Tide was leaving the hospital, she stopped him, dropping a folded heart-shaped bill from above, a repayment of the debt and a romantic gesture. However, Paper Chan reminded Tide once again of his fate as a lone star, warning him that harming others was never good. Reluctantly, Tide decided to sever all ties with Danielle. Meanwhile, Wind encountered something eerie. The faucet in the hospital room suddenly turned on, and when Wind shut it off, he turned around to find an extra person in the room, a water ghost seeking revenge for the fire ghost. Helpless against the water ghost, Wind, a novice, was about to be killed when Tide arrived just in time. Realizing he was no match, the water ghost fled, leading Tide to the swimming pool where he could unleash his power near water. In the water ghost was invincible, exploiting every advantage to vent all his hatred on Tide. Knowing he had no chance against the water ghost in the water, Tide attempted to leave the pool, but he was immediately thrown back in by the water ghost. Tide was hit so hard that his soul was ejected from his body. Tide was now in a vegetative state. Although his heart and breathing were normal, he was on the brink of death. Upon hearing the news, Wind and Paper Chan rushed to the scene. Paper Chan told Wind there was still a way to save Tide. Following his guidance, Wind found Tide's soul, which was standing at the bus stop where he had first met Danielle. It's often where spirits linger, unresolved. Wind instantly understood that Tide had been thinking about Danielle. He encouraged Tide to confess his feelings and make up for regrets. Tide didn't hesitate to use the potion to make Danielle see him. He arranged to meet her and expressed his feelings. However, as time ran out, Tide's body began to disappear. He fled from Danielle, leaving her puzzled. Later, she realized that on the day they met, Tide was actually in a vegetative state in the ICU. Meanwhile, the lone Wind was confronted by the water ghost again, this time directly possessing Wind's body. But before he could cause trouble, the police arrived. The police intended to use Tide's coma as an opportunity to revisit old issues and close down their department. However, Wind was indifferent, solely focused on drinking water. Just as Paper Chan, in his black trench coat, arrived, intending to deal with the possessed Wind, Wind threw a table at the chief, knocking him unconscious. Being the founder, Paper Chan certainly wasn't one to fear. He swiftly adopted a defensive stance and promptly escaped. Tide's soul arrived and punched Wind away. Paper Chan informed Tide that Wind was possessed by the water ghost. If both his eyes turned blue, Tide would have to kill them both, human and ghost. Therefore, Tide had to act quickly. Paper Chan then crafted a sword with his expertise and handed it to Tide. Empowered by the weapon, Tide forced the water ghost into retreat. However, being a sharp weapon, Tide risked injuring Wind. So, Paper Chan quickly crafted a hammer for Tide, attempting to defeat the water ghost with a blunt weapon. Additionally, Paper Chan made a rocket launcher, but the water ghost threw a steel pipe at him, disabling his auxiliary abilities. Left without assistance, Tide had to face the water ghost alone. However, when it rains, it pours. Water cascaded down, turning the area into the water ghost stronghold. Wind's body was instantly taken over. Tide, recalling his bond with Wind, hesitated, unsure how to proceed, allowing the water ghost to relentlessly beat him. Tide gave up, but someone hadn't given up. Danielle was using a defibrillator to revive Tide. With the help of the shot, Tide's body emitted a flash, sending the water ghost flying. Wind briefly regained consciousness and, using his last breath, urged Tide to use the soul-devouring gun on him. Tearfully, Tide complied, but as the tears fell, a miracle occurred. Wind sat up, realizing he wasn't dead, looking around in confusion. With Danielle's efforts, Tide was successfully revived. From then on, the 2002 department was no longer comprised of one human and one ghost, but instead consisted of two humans as partners.